Hello, friends and family and keepers of the faith, to another Del Boy blog. This one is episode 42, and the date is the 11th of December 2022. And just before I hit the record button, I cleared my mind, got my screens up and running, sort of like, so I can get to the questions a little bit later on in the blog, to a point where I can sort of like read them quickly. But that's about it, really. Yesterday I did start writing some notes down, didn't get very far. It's been a bit of a tricky week, so I'll just start off with today. So I woke up, it's bloody cold. That's why I've got my coat on, because straight after this I have to do some chores, get my mum her papers. But I've got to have another hurdle, and that is the snow. So yes, as early as it is in December, we do have snow. It is settling. I know that I've got some grit salt in the garage that I'll be putting down so that my mother can walk to the bins in the morning, to put the rubbish out, that sort of thing, and a little bit along the path outside our house, just in case she needs to cross the road to get anything. But I'm going to have to rely on the council to do something about this, which I'm pretty sure won't be very quick. But other than clearing my mind and so forth, and my notes, that's about all I am prepped for today. So we start off with the news, and as you know, I always keep things going about the war. So what I wrote down was the following notes. So Russia has freed the US basketball star Brittany Griner, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, on Thursday for the notorious arms dealer Victor Bolt. And he is called the Merchant of Death. Now, Brittany has been held in a prison for the last couple of months, but is down for 12 years for a drug offence. Brittany, so all I can say about this is that Joe Biden, who's the president of America, made releasing her a priority at the beginning of the year, and has found this way of releasing her. Although it's not war related, it's that that merchant of death, that arms dealer, that worries me a little bit. So as much as somebody that you know is in prison for a drug related thing that probably is a lie, we're releasing arms dealers that will probably aid the war. So I looked at this and went, this is war related, because I'm pretty sure that as soon as that bloke, this arms dealer, gets out, he's not going to start going straight and get a job as a bus conductor or something. He's going to be probably straight back into what he did before, and if he is an arms dealer, he's probably going to help the Russians. So yes, I counted it as a war story, and I put it in, and my opinion of it is that wrong decision. Joe Biden, even though I do believe that people that put him to prison for things that they haven't done shouldn't happen, and we need to get these people out, especially if they're on foreign soil. And that was really it for the news, because everything in the news has been about strikes for the last, I don't know, it must be 3-4 months. We've had the Royal Mail, we've had trains, we've had the National Health Service, all about conditions of work, I think, is top, and pay obviously second, because pay will always be in there. So there was an article that I read, and it was quite interesting. And I wrote down some notes. So Sam Broadbeck of The Guardian has stated Britain is on strike, but has anyone noticed? That's the question mark that he raised for his article. He stated that Britain is so used to strikes and barely functioning services that the public at least know what to expect on strike day. And he concludes services have to improve. And what I think he meant by that is that when people strike, they're striking for, because they can't afford to live anymore. They also, like the rest of the country, have recognised that more and more money is being fed into these services, but the service doesn't improve at all. So where does that money go? Well, it goes into the coffers, doesn't it, of prime ministers, ministers, stakeholders, directors, and as much as they say we've put this many million into improving things for next year, we never see it. I mean, the amount of times in the summer that we had a hose pipe ban, and they said, well, it's because the reservoirs have gone dry. They've been saying that for 30 years. Where is this money gone? You keep saying the pipes have burst, yet you keep telling us you're replacing all the pipes with plastic ones which are better, and yet millions of gallons of water get lost every year through cracked pipes. You've got to not cut corners and use material that cracks and splinters and breaks, and start using the good stuff again. You can say that about the tarmac that we use on our roads. The amount of times this year that I've seen a road cordoned off because they say they're going to be redoing the tarmac on the road, when actually what they've done is put a load of shingle down, got a roller out and rolled this weak pliers stone with a heavy roller, and then just painted over the lines. And all that stuff does is basically crumble into little bricks and cause great big potholes in the road. And I can't remember, and this is quite true, and it annoys me because I'm a walker, where the money comes from and when they're going to do the pavements. I walk around our estate and do a 2 to 3 mile walk as much as I can, and the amount of patchwork quilt type effect that's on the pavements, plus raised stones, potholes, just like the roads, and yet this is what we're supposed to be walking on. It's got to change. This whole we're starting to crumble to bits. And the last thing I wrote down was really rest in peace, Kirstie Alley. Now, I did put that in Mainmeister's Discord. I didn't put it anywhere in Facebook. I don't really go to that social media much in the last 4 to 5 months, to be quite honest. I think that was the last time I posted something. But Kirstie Alley was one of those actresses, and we call them actors now anyway, that sort of like mingled into everything I sort of watched in a certain period of time. So during those 80s, she ended up in a Star Trek movie, Star Trek 2. She went into Cheers and did 6, I think, seasons of Cheers, where she won television awards for that. And she did some little comedy films like Look Who's Talking and Look Who's Talking 2. And basically, because the 80s was such a boon time for me watching things on TV or watching things at the cinema, she sort of like came into so much of what I wouldn't normally watch. So, when I heard that she'd died of cancer, it was quite upsetting. More and more people from my past are dying, and it's made me look at things afresh again, a sort of a reflection. And as we approach the new year, I'll be doing a lot more of that. Now, I haven't got a topic this week, but I will be talking about that reflection a little bit more, but that'll be a bit later. So what we do now is all the shout outs and the questions. And as I said, then although I don't make a big thing of it, the numbers are dwindling in regards to who's watching and comments and so forth. But I think I'm blessed in the fact that all of the people that do comment, and most of them do this every week, keep me going. And I don't know quite what I would do if they didn't keep me going. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where you do things for a purpose, and the purpose of this is basically a warts and all type of documentary weekly thing where you can see how things affect somebody and the changes they go through. Because one of the changes that I really do think happen is you forget about how you look. You don't care whether you shave, you don't care whether your hair grows long, all of those sort of things. And that's because mood will affect every part of your life. And so I think a blog like this, where you'll hear my talk and the tone of my voice, will indicate possibly whether I'm in a good place or a bad place. So that's the warts and all part of what we're doing. And the problem that you have is it worth continuing if, basically there's no end point or there is nobody watching? Do you know what I mean? I didn't have any expectations for this blog. I was hoping that I might get 10 new people watching, say, every week, and out of that 10, maybe 1%, one person would make a new comment that would spark an interest in a topic or something. And the unfortunate thing is if the numbers dwindle or people watch less, then you get a bit despondent, and there are less things to talk about, and all of the topics have to come from me. So when that does occur, when the numbers do diminish to something, this becomes what it originally intended to be, this blog, which is something to leave behind for my family. So that doesn't need to be a live thing. So, but we'll talk about that more in the topic area. So the shout outs this week, and I do thank every single one of these people. You've taken your time out, and that is Martroid, Rocket Bunny, Mark Whatever, Robert's Retro Gaming, Colin Jones, Cauldron of Stardust, Steve's Gaming, Down the Rabbit Hole, Denny, and Jambon. As you can see, the numbers are much lower than normal, but these people have stuck by me, written a question for me, commented, wished me well, asked how my mother is, and so from that point of view, I keep going, and I'll continue to keep going. While there is so much sort of what's the word? So much love in the atmosphere. I don't know quite how else to put that. So we'll start off with some questions. So we'll start off with Rocket Bunny, who thanked me for answering the questions from last week. So the question for this week, following one of the other comments regarding YouTube suggestions, how were you first aware of MainMeister or discovered his channel? Feel free to describe how your friendship with Alan and the rest of his community has developed since then also. Well, that's a loaded question, and it's a lovely question. It's one of those things, I think, really, that I discovered MainMeister before the lockdowns and before COVID was a word. But I think it was because the work I was doing at that time was the disassembly of the company I was working for, the CRC. We were told 2 years prior that we were merging back with the government, and therefore I was starting to see my hours increase. So there I was doing my normal 8 hours, and suddenly it was creeping up 9 hours, 10 hours, because the one thing that you got to do when you're disassembling a company that was only assembled 3 or 4 years prior to that, was you need to get your records in order. And I was an asset manager, so of course I was making sure that we were still ISO accredited, which still needed to go on regardless of whether we were not going to be there in a couple of years' time. So I was heavily going around the estate making sure the network was okay, writing down the serial numbers for them so that they could be disassembled in a couple of years' time. And I was making sure that every name that was in my asset register was against a piece of hardware they actually had. So many things happen that shouldn't happen. Now, this is one of the first companies I've ever worked for where people take their own decisions in life to keep themselves going. So here's a typical situation. We used to give people devices that allowed them to connect to the internet if they didn't have internet at home or were in areas that didn't have the internet. And there's another reason for it. If you're going to go and see an offender at their house, you can't use their internet. So we switch on our own devices so that we've got internet to work on while we're writing our notes at an offender's home place. If these devices suddenly stop working, they'd go to their friend and say, "Can I borrow yours?" And they'd borrow them, and then it would suddenly turn into, "I'll keep that." And therefore the whole register then starts to fall to bits, because that's just one device. But just extend that now to SIM cards, phones, power blocks for your laptop, mice, etc., etc., etc. That everything suddenly becomes a mess, and you don't know who's got what. And yet I've got to give the numbers that says these were all given back when the company disassembled. Anyway, going off topic a little bit. So I discovered MainMeister because I was getting in a little bit later. By the time I'd sat down and had my tea, which I'd cooked myself, and had a shower, it was sort of like 7 or 8 in the evening. So I would sort of like watch YouTube a bit more, and I'm sure his channel came up. Now, the first time I actually got to speak to him rather than write comments was at his charity event where he did a stream for 12 hours, and that's when I spoke to Panther as well. And I remember the comments that was raised saying, "Boy, he surely could talk, I'll say that." I remember Panther saying that. And I think from then on, it was just one-off appearances. Sometimes Alan would do a live stream and he couldn't get something out that week, probably something to do with work or COVID or whatever. And if he couldn't get somebody on to chat with him, he'd send me a little message. That message suddenly turned into swapping phone numbers. Phone numbers then suddenly turned into weekly chats. And I think, like anything, there are strains in relationships. And because of the strain of what's happened to me at work, you notice that the relationship changes and for the worse. And we're still, good friends. We chat. We offer advice to each other. We both, or should I say more, he calls me than I call him, but there's a reason for that, and that's because I don't know whether he's working or not. We still chat, but it's not like it was before. I think the strain and so forth of me being off of work and the pressures that are being put on me made it probably difficult for certain people to chat to me in the way that they did before. But that's not a negative, because we continue to be there. What I'm trying to reflect on here is that relationships change regardless, don't they, of what's happening. And as long as you don't fall out, as long as you don't turn into enemies, as long as you've got a cordial interest, you know, where we both love computers and we both love our devices and games and so forth, then there'll always be that conversation. All I'm saying is it was closer 6 months ago than it is now, and I don't probably see that changing, because after lockdown things started to return to normal, didn't they? So, you know, he lives in Scotland and I live in the Midlands, part of England. So it's not like I could just walk down the street and have a chat with him. So it's a difficult one, and probably even harder if I talk about other people like Panther and so forth, where you expect relationships again to change quite drastically. So those two people were, I consider, my mentors, and I consider them possibly therefore being two of the greatest friends I could ever ask for. And we're still friends now, but it's not like it was during lockdown. But then again, what is? How's that? That's probably the best way to end that particular part of it. And how's it developed since then? Well, like I say, I still get the phone calls. I still have an input. I do my own blog, which basically has given me my own voice. That wouldn't have happened without those two. And I'm still, an admin of one of those channels. Like I say, there's a lot of love between us both, and I dare say what will happen is as their lives become more a routine, and mine becomes more a routine, things will probably tighten up again. I think it's the very fact that everybody's life is splintered at the moment that causes most of the problems. And I hope that answers your question, Rocket. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. And I hope that didn't come across negative, because one of the biggest things that keeps me going is friendships. And the people that I mentioned there, which are two of the biggest influences on my life in the last 2.5 years, are still around me. And that's what you have to look at. You look at the positives. So Robert's commented this week. He's got a very busy schedule, so it's very difficult sometimes for people to comment every week, and that's something that you have to expect. But he's got a question, so he's put something that's on my mind today is the weirdness of the YouTube logarithm down at the low end of subscriber numbers, as our sort of tubers are. Especially, I'm not trying to turn this into a nice word, but it does interest me. I guess this isn't really a question, but I'd be interested to hear your musings on the topic, and that's YouTube logarithms. Well, I wish I knew more. If I knew more, I'd be able to do a lot more and understand it and adapt, but I'm not. Robert himself will specifically say this week has been a strange one, where he made a mistake, or there was a problem in one of his videos, and he put an apology out that was only 2 minutes long, just explaining, sorry, this mouse cursor point should have been seen in the first 2 videos I've just done. I've corrected it, and please, just notice that things will improve when you get to videos 3 and 4. Very, very simple little apology. That one particular video got, I think, 1,000+ views, some astronomical number. where he's like me, a very small YouTuber with only a 100 or so subscribers for him, and much lower for me, and yet it got 8-9 times the number of views. And there was a contemplation of why that was amongst the discords, and somebody mentioned it's because it's got the word apology in it. And the things that are going on in the world, people just type in the word apology and then single click on something, find out it's not what they wanted, and then move on. What you have to understand with that is it seems very much that everything is keyworded, or something that's going on, or you're extremely lucky with things to get that many views. The highest amount of views I've ever had is 200 and something, which was for a pinball fest. So I'm not the best person to talk about it. But what I will say this is, for me anyway, that it's more about what my blog is trying to say, or what my game reviews are trying to say, than 2,000 people suddenly flocking to one video. And I do think that YouTube's logarithm is so complex that I don't think it actually works very well. It's almost like what we've been talking about in politics, where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and smaller YouTube channels come and go, and the larger ones thrive until they're bored, or just don't want to do it anymore, or the money runs out. I think, like I say, when I get to my topic area, you'll see that I will reflect on things over Christmas and New Year more, and it will all depend on what I want to get out of 2023 that keeps things going, and that's the best way to answer that. So, Robert, it's an absolutely interesting question. I wish I knew more. In fact, actually, I could have asked you that question, and I'd hope that you might have come up with an answer for me, because your channel is so nice, so great. I watch it all the time. That I don't need to wish you success, because you've got it. And as long as the success in your head is you're meeting the expectations of your own yardstick, then good for you. And then we come to Steve's Gaming. And a bit of a shorter comments this week, but that's to be expected a little bit. And he really just asked sort of like a quick question, really. He said, here is just one for you this week. George Johnny Johnson, the last of the Dambusters, passed away this week. The last of the legendary 617 Squadron. And my question is this. In my opinion, they are the greatest generation, and their sacrifice was huge. So many young lives lost. Looking at the state of our country right now, was the sacrifice worth it? Question mark. For decades, I would have instantly have said yes, but these days, I'm not quite so sure. I'd like to know your thoughts, and love to my mum. Thanks very much. My mum sort of did a blowy kiss to you. There's my salute to you. I have got a tip for you though, Steve. I found out the other day that the tooth fairy does exist, and being as you've got new false gnashers, be very careful of putting those under your bed pillow, because apparently you'll be a millionaire when you wake up. It's just something I heard on the grapevine, really. But your question is a very pertinent one, and a great one, and has to be answered, I think, a little bit carefully here, because I don't know what it was, but with me loving TV and movies so much, and loving computers and playing games and all that sort of stuff, when I was taught history at school, it was all about Henry VIII and Elizabeth I, and, you know, even further back. And it interested me and didn't interest me, and the only time that you'd get to understanding what World War One and World War Two was about is if you continued history beyond the third year. And I mentioned before, we had these career people turn up and say, what did you want to do with your life when you leave school? And the career teacher would put you on the road to choosing the subjects that would get you a job when you leave school. So history was dropped for me. But history became something that I naturally loved when Wikipedia and YouTube, the internet all came along, because that's when I was searching around for all these different things. And when you get closer to your granddad, when he's been put into a nursing home and he talks about the war, you then start to get a greater appreciation of what that was like back then. See if I can get my camera back. Seems to be playing up just recently. There we go. I think it's my glasses. Light bouncing. That I would come home and then start reading about battles and things. But I did that anyway when I was watching movies like, I don't know, Eagle's Nest and 633 Squadron and all of that sort of stuff. But I'm digressing a little bit. It saddens me to hear that people that fought in our wars die. But the question was more in relation to, was their sacrifice worth it? And I have to look at these things and go, no matter how society is at the moment, not everybody in this society is bad. And of course life needs to go on. Their sacrifice, therefore, was for a much bigger audience and a much bigger purpose. And so, of course, their sacrifice was worth it and is still worth it now. We just need to teach our generation differently, and we need to let them show respect for the past. And I asked a load of questions to Mainmeister this week that were snippets of reflection in the past and also looking forward. And we've got to give a healthy balance to these people, these youngsters, to respect the past, but constantly look forward to move us on, and move us on in the good, not the bad. Don't be greedy arseholes, you know. But it gets harder and harder, and then you get diminishing returns on what George Johnny Johnson did for us during the war. Now that's the best answer that I can give, because I will always turn around and say the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and that means that we've sacrificed so much in our past to give us ourselves a brighter future for the masses. So I will always think, yeah, it's worth it, Steve, in my eyes anyway. Then we get, so I hope that's a good answer for you. And then we get to Denny, and Denny is a young YouTuber that's branching out, doing his own channels and stuff. He's sort of the same age as me and watched the same things as I did in my childhood, played on the same games in my childhood, watches the same films as I did during my childhood. It's almost like we were separated at birth. I don't think he'd mind me saying that, even though definitely we weren't. So he's got a gentle question for me this week after last week's. He said, what's your favourite Christmas film? Now, anybody that sort of like knows my respect for Mainmeister and the fact that he's asked me on it at certain times, and one of those times was New Year, where it asked me on, and we'd have a nice old chinwag with a drink in our hands, and people would be watching. So, what's your favourite Christmas film has actually been asked of me every year. And I've been on 2 of those things with Mainmeister. He does a different thing at Christmas Eve. He does it with one of his long-term friends, and I urge you to look out for that this year. It would be a very interesting one. But what's your favourite Christmas film? Christmas for me doesn't start unless the film Scrooged has been shown on TV, and that's the Bill Murray film. Now, obviously, through the Christmases of past, my Christmas film has changed, but ever since Scrooged came out, every year I've watched it, and I watch that. For some people it's elves, for some people it's the Santa Claus, some people it's the Muppet Christmas special, and to be quite honest, the Muppets was one that I put in a very high place, along with Scrooged. Not so much Elf and things like that. They have their time, they have their place, and they have people that love them. But I get sick of Elf, like I get sick of Love Actually and all of that sort of stuff and The Holiday. Oh my God, The Holiday! Don't even get me started on that film, The Holiday. It's shown in the bloody summer for a start, sometimes. So that annoys me. But Scrooged is one of those films where it was actually based around a character that's actually in the film, in the TV film industry. It starts off with a joke, with a retro look at Steve Austin, rescuing Santa for an advert for the Christmas schedules. And the Christmas schedules is something that I've grown up with ever since I was able to get a Radio Times and circle a pen around the stuff I was going to watch over Christmas. So when you start turning a classic like Scrooge into a mock-up of a TV station gearing itself up to Christmas, you've got me hooked. And then you've got the sarcastic nature of Bill Murray. So very, very easily, Scrooged became my number one film for Christmas. And yes, I've seen it already. Sky start their movie stuff off so early. And Scrooged has already been shown, and I've watched it twice. If it's on and there's nothing else on, I'm watching it. You see what I mean? So I hope that answers that for you, Denny. That was a wonderful question, and I hope that gave a good answer. And I'd be very interested to know what your favourite Christmas movie is. I'm not going to judge anything. You can call Die Hard a Christmas movie, because it is. You can deliberate as much as you want. I love all of those questions at me. They're brilliant. Do you know what I mean? So then we get to Colin. Great Colin. He's got his own channel. He always asks me lovely questions. He deliberates on some of the things that I make, and he gives a interesting aspect to that. So he's put my question for the next blog: Christmas trees for your own home, real, fake, or none? Always fake in our family. Not that I am fake, but my father was never big on a proper tree with all the needles falling off onto the carpet. It used to drive him nuts. And my father and my father's brother, my uncle, worked on a farm, so we could easily get Christmas trees. It wasn't something that was difficult. But I think my mother liked the aspect of something that folded down and you could put up the next year, and you could make it look different the following year by just buying some new baubles or some new tinsel. So we have got a 6-foot tree. It's in 3 parts with a base. And it's an easy thing for me to get out the attic every year for my mother, and decorate the living room with. The difficulty I've had ever since I've left Manchester is I don't decorate this room because I've got no room. It's a mess, and it's a better mess. It's a more organised mess at the moment, but it's getting better every day. Even though it might not look it, you can't see this particular side I'm looking at now, and it's looking much cleaner and more organised. And so I don't really have Christmas decorations up, and maybe I should. Maybe it will change the reflection of my life at the moment by putting something up. But at the end of the day, I couldn't put up. I mean, the thing about it is cards and all that sort of stuff, right? That are given to you, which I don't get many. Sometimes cards give you that idea of how loved you are. You know, like if somebody sends you a card, they've remembered you. You know, I used to get lots and lots of cards at work, but when I got home, I'd be lucky if somebody had sent. I'd be lucky if I had 4 cards. Do you know what I mean? And email cards don't do it for me. Do you know what I mean? So if you put 4 cards up in your room with a bit of tinsel, even the brightest of people that have a healthy reflection on life would say, that's a poor showing for Christmas. 4 cards and a bit of tinsel. I can't help the fact that I only got 4 cards this year. Do you know what I mean? It's another reminder. So really, Christmas to me has not been the same for me since I returned from Manchester. And I think it started when I was in Manchester, because that was the 7 years of my life where I was by myself. I was miles away from home. I couldn't come down every Christmas. My parents couldn't come up to see me. So Christmas Day ended up being me by myself watching telly and the internet. And the internet would be empty that day because people would be with their family. So another reflection on something that wasn't happening for you. So yeah, I think Christmas turned for me around about 1999, 2000. Yeah. And the last one we've got is from Mark Whatever. So I hope that answered that question. Sorry, Colin. So what's he put? Oh, I didn't click on the read more bit. If you were allowed to buy yourself one thing for Christmas, regardless of cost, i.e. regardless of price, and it wouldn't cost you anything, what would it be? It has to be a physical material item. If you were allowed to buy yourself one thing for Christmas, regardless of cost, what would it be? The first thing is that I never think about me. And the first thing I'd be thinking about is what could I do to improve my mother's life? Other than me leaving and letting her get on with her own life. Because I'm pretty sure with some of the arguments we've had and ding-dongs, she'd appreciate a bit of time by herself. But I always think about others first, and if I'm not thinking about others first, it would be a joint present something that me and the person that I was thinking of could both appreciate together. But what would I buy for Christmas, regardless of cost? It'd have to be something that takes my mind off of life at the moment, world stuff at the moment, you know? Something that would totally keep me engrossed, so I'm not dwelling on crap. The Mister would be a good thing, you know, because it would be something that I'd have time to go on over Christmas, learn about it, build it, update it. I'd be spending hours and hours and hours doing so much prep and then reading up so many articles about how it works that I would probably be sort of like that mad scientist that's trapped in his room, locked away while he works on his next experiment. But the thing about that is it doesn't take away the fact that you have to then go back into the real world when the world starts again, which is probably after New Year's Day. So I'll be going back to real life and then going, what did I do in my Christmas break? I didn't do much, did I? I just sat down with this thing. But your question is asking what I would buy you know, if I was, regardless of cost and so forth. And it's a very loaded question because I'd love to buy myself a house. I'd love, I just love my family to have everything that they could possibly want. And I don't really think about stuff that I want at all. No. So I'm sorry it's such a weak answer. The mister, I said. And I suppose, I've got everything else, haven't I? I mean, I'm a collector. I buy my comics. I buy my videos and DVDs. I buy Sky. I contribute to Sky, and I watch my Sky on my big telly with my surround sound amps, and I've got my stuff around me, and I play music on my keyboard, my Tyros back there. So, really, material things are all around me, aren't they? Yeah. So, Colin and Mark, thank you very much for your questions, and that comes to the end of that particular section. I hope I gave some good answers there. Very, very interesting topics. They've made me think. Like I said, I cleared my mind before I hit that record button, and I think it probably shows today. So, what have I watched this week? Well, not an awful lot, I have to say, and I always start off with what I've watched on YouTube that is not part of the people that comment on my own blog. So, this week in retro, as you know, is sort of like one of those religious things for me to watch each week. And this week they were talking about what if the Amiga was still a thing? What if Commodore had not gone bust? What would have happened? That was an interesting one, but I think it's been deliberated on before, and I didn't see anything really new that makes me think that the bankruptcy was just going to happen, and it doesn't matter. It would have still have happened. But it's nice to deliberate on did Commodore, if it had enough money to throw at it, could they have still been in the industry that they are now? And I've got a funny feeling that they would have done. They could have made daughter boards to go in our PCs. We could have the graphics card, instead of being a Voodoo graphics card, could have been a Commodore card. Do you know what I mean? Because you could have had the chips out of the Amiga and create a graphic card. To me, Commodore influenced an awful lot of things. The Genlocks and the video toaster and all of the great stuff that came out of it. That you can't think of them not doing something in graphics or something in sound. So I just mentioned that as that daughter board as a throwaway comment, but quite rightly, they could have been the Matrox of graphic cards during the mid-90s. Matrox, now there's a name you haven't heard too many times. Yeah. They also demonstrated a person who'd put a PC inside an A500 case. Well, that's a little bit of a lie, actually. It was a 3D printed case that looked like an A500, but the insides of it were shallowed out so that you could fit a mini PC board inside there and a graphic card and so forth. By using sort of like ribbon connectors to go to all of the ports that would be on the board. Because if you think about it, you wouldn't be able to have a graphic card standing upright when you've got a shallow piece of kit like a wedge that the A500 was. And that was very interesting. And they showed the reverse of that by showing somebody that took a BBC B motherboard out and put it inside a tower. And quite rightly, Neil stated, that's more a piece of art than something that you'd want to do yourself. Do you know what I mean? Because they'd lit it all up and it looked wonderful. But what's the point in putting a BBC B into a tower case? Yeah. But there was what I'm trying to get at with this week in retro is this week had more in it for me to get involved with, and from that point of view, so much better than some weeks where it goes off topic to a point where I'm alienated because I've got nothing to say. Tech Moan, who I watch as well, he did a review of something called a vinyl noise reduction device. So it's sat between your amp and your record player. The loop would come in, the audio would come into this device, and then there'd be an out loop to go into your amp and any other part of your stereo system. And it would try and get rid of the pop, crack and whistles that you get from vinyl in real time, rather than doing a gap of 5 seconds and letting it try to digitally process those cracks and pops and whistles. And it was very interesting because he goes into so much depth on why it partially works but would never ever work. Do you know what I mean? And it's a similar thing that we have with 4K movies that I'm watching at the moment, is that the industry seems to be hell bent on making something look as best as possible, and they use what they call dynamic noise reduction, getting rid of grain from film stock and that sort of stuff. You do that and you lose detail. And everything looks waxy. It looks waxy, then it looks like it's computer generated and looks awful. So if you're doing the same with sound from vinyl and you get rid of the pops and cracks and whistles, what you're generally doing is you're muffling that out. And that means you'll probably muffle out some of the lower instrument sounds like double basses in orchestras. And from that point of view, you might as well have just converted your collection into MP3s in the early days and just compressed the hell out of it to the point where you've ruined the top or the lower end of the spectrum of sound. So that's a very good watch, and I definitely recommend that one. ETA Prime is another channel that he decided to show off something called the mini virtual pinball machine. Basically, what's in at the moment with these pinball tables is you can make get a TV like a big 36-inch TV, and you can lay it at an angle, create a wooden housing for it, put the flippers and everything all on the sides of your housing, and you can create yourself a virtual pinball table. And there's this kit that you can buy where you can do that with tablets. And this kit is something like $99, but if you wanted it that came with a tablet, it'd be 200 and something. Now, the reason I was interested in it is because it was such a nice dinky little thing that you look down on. If you can imagine a pinball table, it has to be at a slight slant, for the ball to come down, gravity and so forth. That this thing, it doesn't stand proud like a monitor in front of you. So it'd be really nice that you've got your little device here and you've got your fingers on the left and right, and you can just flipper it. And because the tablet is touchscreen, you can choose your tables by swiping. It was a lovely bit of kit, and I thought that was such a nice piece of kit. I even put a link to it in the Discord channel. Really liked that video. That was great. Now, I don't watch Chinny Vision much anymore, but I did get interested this week because he decided that he was going to take the Auric 1 apart and do a retrospect on the actual machine itself. And the Auric 1 is one of those weird computers which failed. It failed big time. I mean, it did not succeed really in any country. I think France was the biggest place for its sales. But it was marketed as a Spectrum beater. It was £10 less than the Spectrum, and it had equipment inside it that really did give you more than what the Spectrum would. But it didn't have the money, no market. It was one of those hangers-ons like the Dragon 32 was. It's just, it came and it went. Couldn't quite get a foothold. So he took it to bits and he showed off just how well laid out this motherboard was for this Auric. And then went into just how much of a beater it was. It had more, although it was a 48K Auric, it actually had more memory. The speaker was underneath and it was larger. At the back it had a proper RGB out. So it gave you more ports, better sound, and you know, the list goes on and on. Even the keyboard was, although slightly rubber, was an uptrend from the Spectrum version, but it failed. 170,000 units, I think he said, was the number of how many sales there were for that. Definitely a watch, and if he follows it up with the Auric Atmos, I'd be very interested in with that. And then the only thing I can say is that earlier this week I did watch the Fury Wilder fight. Now, I mentioned this because I couldn't watch it on Sky because they do it in their box office thing, and it costs you 15 quid, and it's on at 3 in the morning. And then you can't see it the next day because they've got a right not to broadcast it to anybody other than the people that bought it on the box office tickets for the next week or so. And yet it's on PBS in other countries. And all of a sudden, the next day, you can watch it on the internet. Well done, YouTube. And it raises that topic of, really, should we have big box office Sky events? Because I wanted to watch that fight only purely because, well, we have an English person in it, if you know, a British Isles person in it, in Fury, and Wilder is such a strong puncher that anything can happen in these fights, and generally they do. And these two do go at it hell for leather. And when you watch a heavyweight fight, which is very engrossing for me, because one punch can just do it. Muhammad Ali knew this. One punch can just do it. It's exciting for me. So I just basically, I wanted to mention that that's what I watched on YouTube because Sky just tried to screw you out of the money that they can. So then we move on to what I've been watching of your guys' stuff, and we start off with Colin Ponder. He did a vlog, great blog, and he was talking about the reinstalling of his equipment, and that it was all going, you know, touch wood, really well. Good to do that, you know, every now and again. I don't recommend a total reinstall regularly, but nothing beats an operating system, Linux, Windows, whatever, than when it's been freshly installed. I mean, it basically fires hell for leather. And sometimes it's, you see, the problem with PCs and so forth is that they grow fat because of the registry. If you think everything that happens inside a PC for the software has to be recorded. So if a file is dumped into a folder somewhere and it has a path to it, the registry will make a note that it was there. And then when it's removed, it will make a note that it was removed from there. And any updates that go to it have to show that there was this one that was there, but it's now this one, etc, etc, etc. And that means the registry gets bloated, and no matter what you try and do, you will have a slower PC within 6 months. So there's absolutely nothing you can really do about it. And by the way, that is a very layman's term. You can do lots of things about it, but in a layman's term, that statement is true. So that was a very interesting blog of Ponder's, and I was so happy to know that he didn't come across any big major headaches. And then he did a little gameplay video of Raid over Bungling Bay, which is a favourite of mine. I've mentioned it before. And it's always great to see other people playing games that you used to play, and I get great satisfaction watching people do that. Then we get to Steve's gaming. Now Steve's doing something really interesting. Oh, sorry, my salute. There you are. He's doing what they call Christmas games, and he's doing it like an advent calendar. So he started off with the first day of Christmas, and obviously we're now up to sort of like 11 or 12. And they have to have a Christmas theme to it. Although that's something that I've seen before other people do, it's always great fun. And there'll always be one that you never saw, you know. I mean, so far out of the collection that he's shown, I think there's been 2 that I've never seen in my life. And that's very interesting for me, because anything that's new, my eyes suddenly, I suddenly wake up and take notice. So that was great. Keep that up, Steve. We love you to death, and we just love you dying in your games. No, I don't. We don't love you dying in your games. We just love everything that you do in your channel. Now, Down the Rabbit Hole did a game review, not a game review, but showing off a game on an Atari that would have been for an Atari Lynx called Turbo Sub, but is part of the Atari Anniversary 50th collection. That's the best way to explain it. And quite rightly, he turns around and says, just look at how this game runs on a piece of kit like the Atari Lynx was, and how much of a failure that handheld was, and just how advanced it looked. And it's quite true. That game looks stunning, even now, and yet the Atari Lynx is a bythought these days. So that's definitely worth a watch. And thanks for that, Rabbit. He did do another video on, I think it's what they call Star Frontiers, a role-playing game thing. I haven't quite got round to watching that, Rabbit, but I will do. So thanks for bearing with me on that. And then Robert's Retro Gaming has moved forward into a new game that was released this week called Dwarf Fortress. Now, Dwarf Fortress is not new. It's been around for years. It's been released now as a full release, and it's had a graphical makeover. And so this game has been sort of like 10 or 12 years in the making. And all of a sudden now you can buy it in a sort of like complete package. Unfortunately, I can't explain what it is very well, because I wasn't really there at its inception. I knew of it, don't get me wrong. I knew it was around. It's just I knew it would sap up my life, because it's sort of like a book that writes itself. You're starting off the history of your dwarf kingdom with the very first mouse click on the world that you're presented with. Everything around it, it writes scriptures of the stories that set off this brewery or this shop or this fort or this tree that's growing or whatever. That complex, it writes itself. So if you're ever intrigued on Dwarf Fortress, he's doing a series of videos on how to play the game, and you're going to discover things as you move on. And that leads us now to the end of what I've watched on TV, and I haven't watched an awful lot. So I watched on Netflix Love, Death and Robots Series 3, which is a series of shorts, mostly graphically rendered shorts. It's a bit like Black Mirror, but with a mixture of live action and a mixture of computer generated animation. I've got great enjoyment every season I've watched of it. I knew the third season had been out a long time, but I hadn't got round to watching it, and I finally got round to watching the stories that were in this particular third season. I then watched on Netflix the film called Troll, which is sort of like a Godzilla, but it was fun. The nice thing about it was Netflix has got so much money coming into it now that the special effects might as well be a Godzilla at the cinema. And this is about a troll that suddenly comes to life, and it comes out the mountain and then suddenly starts causing havoc. And the special effects were really quite nice. I thought they weren't bad at all. Definitely one to watch for an hour and a half. Do you know what I mean? Popcorn film, that sort of thing. Then I watched episode 3 of Willow. The jury is still out on whether I'm totally enjoying it, but it's definitely not bad at all. I'm enjoying it. And then I went back to watching some Black Mirror episodes, particularly season 4, which I thought was a very strong season for Black Mirror before it was. Well, it's not been cancelled officially. It's just that there haven't been any more episodes for years. So you might as well say that Charles Brooker's not doing that series much anymore. Now, I said there was no topic, and there really isn't. But I will say this. Christmas is a topic, and I always wish people well for Christmas. But do also understand that there are people that don't enjoy Christmas. Not always for religious reasons. It's just things have happened during their year or years, and they can't find the enjoyment that they used to have as a kiddie. Try to help them find that if you can. If you can't, respect it. And, make them still feel wanted and part of things. Because that's the best way that I can sort of express what Christmas means to me, really, at the moment. I'll do everything I can to make my mum feel comfortable. Do I feel the same as I did 30 years ago for Christmas? No. And I don't think I'll ever grab that back, which is a shame. Other things that have happened to me this week. Mainmeister did a little video of a shoot 'em up called A Blast from the Past, and 2 weeks ago I looked at that as well and gave my notes, and that's not too far away from being released. There is a page for it on Steam. It's definitely a nice little shooter. As long as it's priced accordingly, it would definitely be a recommend from me. I did give some observations that I still think would like to be included. Whether they will or not, I'm not sure. But I spoke to the programmer, and I've got total faith that he took everything that I said into retrospect, and I'm very proud of what he's done. It's an incredible thing to be able to create something that people can play on. It's like a Gallagher game, but it's not. So with that, I'm going to let you investigate that a bit more. And the other thing that I've been doing is with Rocket Bunny. I've been playing on the Valheim server, and we got together this week, and we've spent a little bit of time, and that sort of stopped me watching some things on telly quite so much. So he's the reason. Your fault, Rocket. But no, we're having a great time on the server. I did a little video. Go and watch that, and you can join us. It doesn't take much to join the server, but you will need to have a copy of the game Valheim to do so. And we're having great fun at the moment exploring the map, looking for this Mistlands that we both so want to be able to get onto. And then lastly, we get to really the last part, which is what I bought this week. So this week, this arrived on Monday, which is the second season of Doctor Who. So we're now going back to what, 1963, 4? Yeah, somewhere around there. I believe they brought this one out as late as they have because of the empty episodes that the BBC don't have. And the fact that out of the whole of the season of Doctor Who, for which there were 9 stories, only one of them is affected by missing episodes. There's 2 missing episodes, for which they filled it in with what they call telesnaps and audio recordings. So if you go further back, or if you go forward from there, the junking of the BBC's episodes or content in the 60s meant that many stories are just totally gone, disappeared. So much harder for them to bring out box sets of collections, if you see what I mean. And then these came during the week. There's been a huge backlog because of the Royal Mail strikes, but Star Trek 6 finally arrived to go with my Star Trek 5. Somebody mentioned, oh dear, about Star Trek 5. to be quite honest, Star Trek V gets a bad rap. It's not the best. It's not the greatest. It's far from absolutely atrocious. It's one of those films that its aspirations were just too much for its time and its budget. Then you've got Empire of the Sun. I think it's an anniversary on that one. No, it's not. No, it's just a Blu-ray steelbook of Empire of the Sun. Always did like Empire of the Sun. Got a soft spot for that one. Not a typical Steven Spielberg film, really. Yeah, just fond memories of watching that in my teens. Then we got Evil Dead 2 steelbook in 4K, which I've been waiting a long time for this one. Really nice cover, nice and shiny steelbook. And then this one is an obscure one that many people might turn around and go, "Oh, that one," right? Because you've got King Kong back in the 30s, and you've got the Peter Jackson remake King Kong that he did in the noughties, the 2000s. This is the 1977 King Kong, which was heavily promoted, cost an absolute fortune, had a stellar cast, but it came and went and people forget. It's a bloody long film. I think it's about 3 hours, if I remember rightly. Heavily advertised in all my comic books, which is why I knew about it. And I'm looking forward to having another look at that film, because I haven't seen it for many, many years. And then just a couple of extra ones. Arrow, which is a great company. That's the A symbol on the side there. Bringing out these collections of films. This one happens to be Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, but it's just the amount of extras and the beauty of their steel books that make me go and get these. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves wasn't a particularly fantastic film for me, but it wasn't a bad flick. I prefer Ridley Scott's version of Robin Hood a little bit later on, and Mel Brooks did Robin Hood Men in Tights, which is atrocious, by the way. But you get my meaning, that sometimes it's just nice that there's a big blockbuster and it's a popcorn flick and you can step in and out of it, like I can. And then another Arrow release is The Wolf of Wall Street, which, again, I do like Martin Scorsese films, Goodfellas. I've got a very soft spot for his films. This one is in the form of a leather-bound wallet, because it's all about money. So that was sort of like a instant purchase for me. And I don't think I've got much else to say, other than I wish you well. When it comes to my blog, what I meant at the beginning stands true, in the fact that we're heading into an area of reflection, and I'm going to get some rest. I will be doing... Christmas falls on a Sunday this year, and my blog comes out on a Sunday. I will do my blog on the Sunday. Hell for leather, it will get done. But it'll be there for you to watch when you're finished with your family, basically. But for me, this is a weekend blog, and it doesn't matter that Christmas falls on that day. New Year's Day is a weekend, so I'll be doing it then as well. So with that, they're coming up. I hope you continue to watch. I've now got to go out in the snow, which I think I can finally show you now, because we've got to the end of the blog before I say goodbye. So if I turn that around, you can see the snow. Yay! And with that, bye-bye till next week. Bye.